Welcome to episode 21 of the Expert Cruise Show. I'm Chris, he's Anthony, and today we're going to be delving into one of our favourite cruise lines. We've spoken about it a bit before, but this time we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on all things Cunard, Anthony.
Yes, we've spoken about it just a little bit. It's funny, isn't it? It's like our barometer. And as much as we love all the lines, and I'd like to travel as much as I can on everything from celebrity and royal, a little bit of carnival here and there as you do. And, you know, I haven't yet to do Holland America, but I've done NCL. Keep coming back to Cunard. And why is that? Is it because of our love of the heritage and that connection to Titanic and the White Star Line? Do you think that's what it could be?
I think there's a bit of that. I also find that we get so many requests on the channel for Cunard related news and content and deep dives. And what we kind of have done on this channel, in this show rather, in the back catalogue, is there's an episode all about Queen Mary, there's an episode about QE2, there's an episode about Queen Mary 2, but we keep getting messages saying, like, what about the rest? What about the Cunard experience as a total? Because we've done the celebrity experience, we've spoken about that, we've spoken about NCL as a brand, we've spoken about Royal Caribbean as a brand and as an experience. So I guess we're giving the people what they want.
Yeah, I think that, you know, Cunard is different to other cruise lines in as much as the traditions haven't really changed, you know, whereas Norwegian Cruise Line has tried to modernize and find itself a younger audience. And I mean, many of the lines have, because, of course, years ago, the cruises were for older people who invariably had the money to be able to cruise. But I think that the cost of cruising has come down. But Cunard still remains. It's not overpriced. I mean, Cunard actually is priced very similarly to the other ships, you know. And I always talk about $130 a day per person, and Cunard, you really can do that. I was just pricing up an Alaskan cruise on Queen Elizabeth, and yeah, it came in about, you know, a couple of $1,000s for two people for a week, and that's kind of how much it should be, not really more than that, because, you know, you are going to spend a bit on board. But there is a certain added value with Cunard that I think that you don't really get with some of the other cruises. And maybe we should start with the rituals of, like, afternoon tea. I mean, it's kind of amazing that that's free.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty special. And actually, you were just talking about Queen Elizabeth in Alaska, because she's also she's just on her way now, I think it is, towards Miami to do a season in the Caribbean. Only one season. So if you are in the US market and you want to get one of these Cunard voyages in the local waters, you have an opportunity to experience Queen Elizabeth, where you can have in the afternoon every day, every even a port day, afternoon tea with white glove service. They provide scones and cakes and sandwiches. There's a harpist usually on the dance floor. Sometimes there's the band playing as well, and it is a bit of a ritual. And this kind of links back to the era of the ocean liner, where particularly in first class and also second cabin, they would have these afternoon tea experiences, I suppose. It was expected on the ship to have tea in the afternoon in the Grand Salon or in the ship's first class lounge. And this is continued. It was continued through the era of QE2, Sagafjord and Vistafjord. Royal Viking Sun did it. And now, of course, the current fleet does those sorts of very special old-style rituals that you don't... You know, other cruise lines do it. And in fact, you know, even say Fred Olsen, for example, does an afternoon tea experience, but it's not in the grand ballroom with everyone invited for no extra tariff.
That's right. I mean, Holland America does a high tea, which they do in the main dining room. But again, it doesn't quite have that kind of special something that Cunard has, with the parading of the serving staff and the gloves and the White Star uniforms. I mean, it's pretty special. And then the other thing is that, you know, people forget you can actually order afternoon tea to your cabin. You know, so you can actually get it served in your room, or you can go and have it for free in the buffet in the King's Court or whatever it's called on your ship. So I think that, you know, there are different ways. You don't have to kind of buy into the formal thing every time. There are other ways of doing it. And so, Yeah, I just think that the ritual and the formality and the dressing up, I just love all of that stuff. And also maybe it's the Britishness. Maybe that's the reason why I keep coming back to Cunard after going on other American lines, even though Cunard is going to owned by Carnival, but P&O and Cunard are still really run as British brands out of the UK, aren't they?
Yeah, there's Carnival House in Southampton. And that's where the majority of the people who run the brand Shoreside operate from. Both P&O's cruises there's only one left now in the UK, and then of course Cunard as well. They're both run out of that same office right there by the piers, so you can basically almost see the ships from Carnival House. And the interesting thing is that you do hear a lot of people perhaps who are seeing a few of the changes that Cunard's making recently, sort of referring to Carnival and the impact that Carnival's had on Cunard. We can't forget, of course, that Carnival acquired Cunard all the way back in 1998. This is not a new thing. And they acquired it when it was on its knees. It was owned by Caverna. It had been passed over from a sale that was done with Trafalgar House, where it was owned by Trafalgar House since the 1970s. And there was just not the investment in that late 1990s in the brand. And Cunard was really saved and revitalized by Carnival, by Mickey Arison. And that's what allowed for the current fleet to be built, which is the 4 ships that they've got now are all post-Carnival ships. And Queen Mary 2 particularly, we spoke about her in depth last week with Stephen Payne in our very special 20th episode special edition there. You'll know from that episode that Queen Mary 2 would not have existed had it not been for the 1.5 or so billion dollars that was required that Carnival put up to build that ship.
The other thing is the consistency between those ships within the brand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Queen Anne is a little bit of an anomaly because they've tried to modernize a little bit, but they're still doing afternoon tea in the Queen's Room and things like that. But it's a very consistent experience. So if you go on Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, or Queen Mary 2, it's basically the same. Yes, of course, the Elizabeth and Victoria are not a bespoke ocean liner. They're kind of enhanced Vista class ships, but they're still beautiful and very suitable for Cunard. Things like a wraparound promenade deck, really important, having that extra space for the Queen's Room, and they have a beautiful Queen's Room. It's different to the one on Queen Mary 2, but it is as good. And I remember when I went on board for the first time on both those ships, I didn't have a single complaint. I had plenty of complaints when I went on Queen Anne for the maiden crossing in January, but on Elizabeth and on Victoria, having done Queen Mary 2 back in 2004, I was like, this is just great. It was a little bit like seeing new Star Wars after getting no Star Wars for like 30 years. When the prequels came out, those of us that were fans, we were like, this is great. It was only the critics that didn't like the films. And it was the same when Queen Victoria showed up. It was like, I've not had any new Cunard for years. And suddenly 3 of them come along all at once, just like buses. It was so impressive.
Queen Victoria, when she first entered service, was actually the best I think she's ever been, because when they first put Queen Victoria into service, they had learnt from what they'd done with Queen Mary 2. The original plan with Cunard was actually going to be Carnival's big British growth arm, but then Carnival and P&O Princess, basically, it was another company. They merged / were acquired and became P&O basically became Carnival's British growth market. And so Cunard had to pivot, and they had a ship that was being built at the time that ultimately ended up becoming Arcadia for P&O Cruises. She was being built for Cunard, but they realized she wasn't quite right for the Cunard brand.
Didn't have room for the Queen's Room in the middle.
Exactly.
Right?
So they redid the Vista class and created the Queen Victoria. And when she first entered service, Anthony, there was only 3 classes of cabin accommodation. There was Queen's Grill, Princess Grill, and Britannia. There was no Britannia Club, so you had the chart room bar, which was this beautiful bar that they had right where the Britannia Club restaurant is now. but they also had Cunardia on board, which was their heritage trail. And it was a much, much more expansive heritage trail than what they have on the ship now. It had this beautiful bespoke display cabinets that looked a little bit like the shopping promenade on the RMS Queen Mary. They also had on the upper level, there was where the art gallery is, there was Cunard memorabilia interplaced with the art gallery. The ship itself just felt very Cunard from the very start. And despite the fact that she is a Vista class ship, there are a few shortcomings on the Vista class design, but it really did work for that Cunard brand. And then it was so successful, of course, that they did the same thing with Queen Elizabeth and used another Vista class platform with the same expansion for the Queen's Room, and very much the same ship in terms of floor plan, quite different style of decor, I suppose, on board. But the two ships, they do blend in really nicely and have quite a lot of Cunard heritage on board, even now in 2025.
Victoria is a slightly darker wood ship, isn't she? And whereas Elizabeth, who has just had a bit of a refit, so she's had some much brighter carpets and a beautiful upgrade in my opinion, is just a little bit brighter, and that's why I was looking forward to taking her to Alaska next year, because, as you say, it's kind of the last chance for some of us to kind of get to travel on her, who especially on that route. And I can imagine that Alaska, which is a route that I encourage everybody to do once before they die, it's just so fantastic. And so to do it from the smaller ships, these 90,000 gross ton ships, I think is the right way to see Alaska.
Yeah.
You do it on a mega ship, it can't really get down in as far as some of the smaller ships can.
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth had spent pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic used to sail to Australia and spend our summer season here, and then it would go up to Japan and then across to Alaska, then back to Japan, then back to Australia. It's recently left this year Australia, and Cunard actually doesn't have a ship based in the Southern Hemisphere anymore, and it's going to be obviously doing combination of Alaska and then the Miami voyages until it repositions back to the Mediterranean. And in preparation for this American season, I suppose, the ship was sent to Singapore for refit, and the interior has been modified. They have changed quite a lot of the carpeting to brighten it up, I suppose. But one of the things that they did do, they've learnt from Queen Anne in that the pavilion area on Queen Anne, where the swimming pool is so well designed and so well utilised on board, with restaurants and a wellness cafe and that sort of thing, that the very underutilised swimming pool area on the Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, but on Queen Elizabeth particularly, they have built in a wellness cafe in what was the pavilion bar, which had actually just been used as a towel dispensary for years for the swimming pool.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really positive change, because there is one of the things I would say about the Vista class is, if you look at the Vista classes you look at the deck plans and you look at the ones for Holland America and you look at the Arcadia for P&O, there's a lot more smaller rooms, more bars, more lounges that are just smaller and more intimate on board. They use the space slightly differently. Where Cunard went with much bigger spaces. They have a very large Corinthia lounge or chart room, depending on which ship you're on. They have quite a large nightclub. They have the very large Queen's Room. They have, of course, the big Commodore Club at the front. And that means that there's just a few less options in terms of where you want to go on board the ship. So bringing things in like the Wellness Cafe gives another option for a meal, or for you to visit somewhere different.
They've put tables and chairs out there by the pool, and they're kind of covered, so they've created more of an outdoor grill, I guess. The same as you might have on the Celebrity Edge class ships, where you have this kind of garden that has a grill attached. It's just so nice to use spaces that aren't getting much action, and I think that these days the people that actually whose job it is to research and design these upgrades, I think they really got it right with the new style Queen Elizabeth.
I would love to come on board with you so we could go and experience for ourselves, because there's so much mixed feedback. There's probably about 50-50 of love-hate with those changes.
But if you put the old carpet side by side with the new carpet, it's hands down a win, because the old carpet was very muted, and it was fine, I think, when the ship came out. but you have to modernize a little bit because you can't modernize architecturally. So the structure is very much of a period. But
well, that's the problem, though, Anthony, is that the structure is of a period, and when you put, say, silverish hued carpets in with dark wood that have chandeliers, it can clash, and that's why I find photographs difficult. You have to see it in person, I think, before you can make judgments. So from a picture...
There's a guy who's done a video of the side-by-side where he literally goes around showing what it was like before and after, and that was what really clinched it for me, because I agree, in the photos, it's very hard to tell, and even in the artist's impression that Cunard put out, you know, they have these rather brilliant kind of imagery created in the computer, but you can't really tell. But... you know, I just feel, I don't feel like they're overcooking it. And to me, it doesn't clash. And as you know, I have excellent taste. So, I'm able to make a kind of informed decision. But I just think that we would be foolish to try to hold on to a period that, you know, has not got much future in it. You know, it's not the carpet that is ultimately going to give you the experience. It's the crew. It's obviously the structure, the sailing, the ports.
Well, they did a similar thing with
aspects.
They did a similar thing with Queen Mary 2 in 2016, where they did the remastering. I thought there was a lot of mixed feedback about that when it first happened too. And from the get-go, because I was very lucky in that after Queen Mary 2 was remastered, I was on one of the first voyages as a guest speaker, and I thought that the new carpeting and the starburst effect was absolutely superb. And it stood the test of time. It's actually been like that now for longer than it was.
They've replaced it with identical carpets.
Well, they have, yes, and that's the thing. But you know, what I find interesting as well, though, is that I guess I look back at we have photographs of every inch of all of those ships from every era of their incarnation, and I look back to Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth, to their 2007 and 2010 design, and gosh, they were good. Like when they came out, they were everything just worked so well together. They really did put a lot of thought into those original designs. And as you mentioned, you know, Queen Victoria comes across as a darker ship. Oddly enough, most of the wood paneling is almost identical, but it's the lighter touches that they've brought in on Queen Elizabeth, like the lighter coloured marquetry panel in the grand lobby. They brought in some lighter illumination throughout the room, bigger chandeliers that just brightens her up. And also, again, it sounds obsessed with carpets, but the carpeting on board did lift the ship a little bit. And so it does give the two of them a very distinct feel. And it's very similar to how Cunard addressed ships in the past, where, say, for example, Lusitania, Mauritania, all the way back in 1907. Two ships, very similar floor plan. Lusitania was light, Mauritania was exposed woods. The two ships had totally different feels on board. And you had these people who were either in Camp Lusitania or Camp Mauritania. And I think you have the same thing on Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria.
Yeah. I would say that if you want to get the real Titanic experience, I think Queen Elizabeth is probably the closest in terms of the colour scheme around the grand lobby. Would you say so?
Well, yeah, I suppose for me...
Just the design of the staircase on Elizabeth looks more like the staircase on Titanic than the Queen Victoria.
That all comes down to the colour choices, because the staircase structure on those two ships is an identical structure. So it's amazing what they can do with like changing balustrades and changing colour palettes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And I think Titanic... You know, we see, well, firstly, we don't have any photographs of Titanic's grand staircase. They're all Olympics, which we've touched on before, which is, of course, the sister ship. But a lot of those photographs were taken from a level looking up at the Honor and Glory, and you see the wood paneling and the staircase coming up. But the flooring was actually a light color as well, which is probably why Queen Elizabeth resonates more with you, because she does have those lighter features. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I have a little surprise for you. I don't know if you know this. It's only trivia. But at the top of the Queen Elizabeth staircase, for all to see, is a marquetry panel?
Marquetry panel, yeah.
That was designed by Viscount Linley, who is the Queen's cousin. And he has a shop in London called Linley, and he designs furniture. I don't think I ever told you this. And so when I was living in London, I lived very nearby to this shop, and I would go past it on the bus every day, and I could look in and I could see them working on this marquetry panel.
Wow.
That was going to end up on Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, that's so cool.
Right? So eventually, when I knew they'd finished it, because there was a whole press thing, and I got an invitation to actually go and see it unveiled in the shop. And so then the next time I saw it was when I did the maiden crossing on Queen Elizabeth, and there it was, stuck up just in that empty space that they had kept for it. And so it's kind of weird, seeing that shift from it going near my house to onto this amazing ship, and of course it's still there.
That's so interesting. I guess every time you go back to Queen Elizabeth now, you'll have that connection to your life in London.
just a tiny connection, but it's very exciting.
That's
and I really did get a lot of pleasure from being so nearby this beautiful piece of art that was going to end up on the ship. And the one on Queen Victoria is kind of it's less exciting for me anyway. It doesn't have the same draw.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's probably worth talking about is the different friezes in the Britannia dining rooms across the three ships. I'm leaving Queen Anne out of a lot of this because to me she's a bit left field. They tried a little bit too hard to make it different. But certainly the three original queens, that if we start with Queen Mary II, that beautiful fabric that hangs.
Yeah, the tapestry.
In the dining room, the tapestry, that again, it depicts the original Queen Mary, I think, and it looks like it's the ship arriving into New York under a flotilla with celebrations. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of a hybrid ship. So it's got elements from the Queen Mary, but if you look at it, you can also see actually a bit of a hint from the German liners, the Bremen and the Europa.
Interesting.
It's got the curved forward. The bridge is a lot more sort of streamlined than Queen Mary's. So it's kind of like depicting the ocean liner as an experience. And then I think the bridge in front of it is supposed to be the Brooklyn Bridge, because it's got all of the interconnected
That's right. That's what
metals.
It looks like anyway. Yeah.
I think it really anchors the room to that arrival in New York, where so many millions of people on Cunard ships over the years migrated to America. And as we heard last week in episode 20, Dr. Stephen Payne wanted that room to be for everyone. It's a ship of state dining room for everyone. And given that so many people experienced that arrival in steerage, it's quite nice to have a ship that depicts a bit of all the ocean liners there with that tapestry. And then
the other two dining rooms, they don't have a kind of tapestry, but they do have some very ornate kind of collage work. And is it the Victoria that has the globe?
Yes.
Right? And they look so different, but again, they're kind of similar. I mean, the dining rooms on Victoria and Elizabeth are so much smaller than on Queen Mary II, but they're also rather brilliantly designed. They feel more intimate, but they can actually pack in a vast number of passengers.
It's quite interesting how the exact same floor space can be used quite differently. So Victoria's, the design was influenced by hints from the Orient Express, the main dining carriage on board. So you'll see the darker woods used throughout that space. That globe showcases obviously not just the transatlantic passage, but the fact that Queen Victoria is a cruise ship. She's going to go on world cruises, so you see the ship in various different places. And then behind it, of course, it's showcasing that iconic transatlantic passage. Queen Elizabeth has the same outline, but doesn't have the globe. Queen Victoria has two spiral staircases, very discreetly hidden at the forward end of the room, very similar to what you might find in sort of smaller or older dining rooms on board the older liners. Queen Elizabeth has the grand staircase in the middle, which sort of feels a bit like Queen Mary II. So the two do have very distinct feels about them, despite being basically the same floor plan.
It's so clever. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody really talking about these art pieces that separate these three dining rooms, and the theming for Victoria and Elizabeth is very Art Deco, isn't it? Kind of really leans in to that Art Deco design in the dining rooms.
Yeah, and Elizabeth took a lot more of an Art Deco hint. They basically pulled the Elizabeth's whole story was about linking the three Cunard Queen Elizabeths. So there's the Queen Elizabeth that was put into service in 1938. All those Art Deco hints come from her. She was an Art Deco ship. But then you found that there was some various spaces on board where they tried to pull from the QE2 as well, particularly in the yacht club. There's even little sails, little flags rather, that if you know how to read
around the room. Yeah,
if you know how to read flags, it talks about the QE2, which is quite interesting. And actually, when the ship first entered service, they had a whole heap of memorabilia from QE2, including the bust of Her Majesty the Queen and the silver model that was on board QE2 for years. That's all gone back to Dubai, but that was with Queen Elizabeth when she first entered service. They had it on loan from the QE2. But, that's the thing that really frustrates me with Cunard from a historian's point of view, is that they did it right on Queen Mary 2, where they told you what it was you were looking at. There's little plaques all over the place, and they did that on QE2. Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, you could put more information around the ships. And Queen Anne, my goodness, please. Yes. I'm waiting for the phone call. Please, I will write them for you. We can tell the story on Queen Anne, because she also, your point is perfectly fair. She feels like she's left to feel, but there is all sorts of hints to Cunard's history throughout the ship that
it's just so subtle, isn't it?
Well, if you know, but no one's been told. It's so frustrating.
That's right.
So the dining room,
the Bright Light Society, people really haven't got a clue about the first ship with the electric light bulbs.
Servia.
It's like it's not. I mean, if you go looking for it, you can find the information, but it's not offered up. I mean, they should be saying it in the shows. They should probably start the shows with that information.
Yeah.
It would be kind of nice to kind of educate people as well as entertain them at the same time.
The last time we spoke about this, we had a bit of an argument break out in the comments, and one particular person said, I'm not traveling on a bloody museum. I don't care about plaques. And it's like, well, if you don't want to read the plaque, don't read it. But for all of the other people who are like, I don't know, maybe people don't think about it, but I'm going into Bright Light Society and there's a model of Servia there, which there isn't, but if there was, and then there's a little plaque underneath that says, Servia was the first Cunard ship to have electric lighting, hence this room's got thousands of light bulbs throughout it. That's interesting to a lot of people. And I think that was what makes Cunard a bit different, is that it's got the things you would expect on a cruise ship, but it's also got a little bit of quirkiness about like these connections with history. And Queen Anne is different, but she could be just that little bit more part of the family if they just put up some information about it. And it doesn't have to be in your face. It can be subtle.
A few more chairs in the Queen's room wouldn't go amiss either,
Oh, goodness.
Just a few. I am going back on Queen Mary 2 in a few weeks, and I am really very, very excited. I have never, ever gone back on the same ship twice in the same year, apart from the Navigator of the Seas, which I did recently. But they were very short cruises. And it was literally a case of, and I've really over Cunarded it this year, because I did the maiden crossing of Queen Anne in January. Then I did Queen Mary 2 to Canada, and now another Queen Mary 2 trip as well. And so it's not that I'm overdosing, but we had such a good time on Queen Mary 2, and my wife had never been on her before, and her only experience of Cunard was the Queen Anne crossing, which was it was an interesting experience, bumping around the North Atlantic and having the captain come on and tell us that everything's fine. But then saying, but we're going to be 2 days late into New York,
Shame.
So that was kind of I would really wanted her to experience kind of classic Cunard, which is why I booked that cruise to kind of, that trip to kind of coincide with you getting off the ship and me getting on the ship the next day, and unfortunately we didn't get a chance to meet, but maybe it's better that way. I always say you should never meet your heroes, and so it's probably best that you don't meet me,
It's
Chris.
very true. I shouldn't. No.
It's
No,
probably the best joke
I
I've
just
done
thought
all
it was
year.
remarkable the efforts you went to make sure that you got on Queen Mary 2 as long as I wasn't on board. Like it was just But you
Yeah,
did
I
get a
know.
chance to meet Dr. Stephen Payne.
He very kindly came to my hotel and we hung out for a couple of hours and we got drunk on free coffee and cookies. So
Nice.
that was a nerding out on Cunard history that particular day. But so that's why I was just keen to get another Queen Mary trip in, and so I was able to secure a voyage. I just feel like it's a real privilege to go on the flagship.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
cruise ships come and go, but there's only one Queen Mary 2. And if you haven't done Cunard before, Queen Mary 2 is a great place to start. It really is. And as I've said in previous episodes, the transatlantic crossing, if you're doing like a last-minute booking and they've still got inside cabins left, you can get it for as little as like $500 per person for a 7-night crossing. And that is an absolute bargain considering you are the lineage of ocean liners, her being the last kind of in-service liner. To pay so little and get so much in return, I think it's a no-brainer.
It's really interesting as well because, I mean, our audience knows I love the Cunard ships. Like, I'm very fond of Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth, and I even love Queen Anne. I think she's great in many respects. But that being said, there's only one ship in that fleet that is the ship. And it's like the ultimate ship, as we've discussed before. And that is, of course, Queen Mary 2. And one of the things that I think about as a maritime historian is historically, the Cunard Queens were their flagship liners, their best liners. And so you have Queen Mary and you have Queen Elizabeth and then you have QE2. And when they retired, they didn't go to other cruise lines. Queen Mary became a hotel. Queen Elizabeth was going to be a hotel, then ultimately was sold to become a floating university, and QE2 went to become a hotel in Dubai. There was no way to move those ships to another brand. They couldn't go and sail for a Princess or P&O or whatever. They kind of ended their lives with Cunard. Queen Mary 2 wouldn't fit anywhere else. She's a Cunarder from bow to stern, from top to bottom. There is an argument that could be said that Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, and Queen Anne, based on the Vista class and the Pinnacle class, could be retrofitted and moved into a different brand. And that's absolutely true. And look, you could try and do it with Queen Mary 2 if you ever wanted to, but it just wouldn't quite work. She is the embodiment of Cunard. She is the last sort of in the line of that 185-year tradition of having ocean liners crossing the North Atlantic. And I think just like QE2 was Cunard in the 90s and 80s, Queen Mary 2 really is Cunard in 2025. And a very, very special ship that everyone who loves ships should try at least once, I think. And of course, this is not sponsored. This episode is completely our own opinions, but she just is something special.
My wife says that Queen Mary 2 is a ship for people who don't do cruises. And I think that's a really great way to describe it because, not everybody likes a cruise, but because Queen Mary 2 is so shippy, because you see so many more exposed ship bits, aside from the teak wood promenade deck, but because of that long bow and that breakwater and the way the superstructure is and the fact that you can walk 360, but you actually have to kind of walk into the superstructure at the front. And if you want to go out to the front to see the Commodore's cufflinks, you actually have to kind of climb through a very shippy door.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
The shell door, basically. Like it's designed to stop the waves from coming in and flooding the ship.
Right. So you're actually getting much more of a ship experience.
Yeah.
And the same is up top. You go up to deck 13 and you just see vast amounts of nothing. And like on any other ship, including the other queens, every inch of space is taken up with revenue generating or, whether that be cabins or restaurants or bars or something. But the fact that Queen Mary 2 still, and hey, they could change anything at any time, but you get this vast areas of nothing, of just teak wood. it really is testament to the fact that they know that an ocean liner needs to be like this in order to get that kind of, what does he call it? Like the cake
the
shape.
wedding cake, isn't it? Yeah.
The wedding cake, that's
Yeah.
right. So that it is the right shape for an Atlantic crossing. And I just think it's marvelous going out there and just being amongst nothing. You know, you get to see bigger skies and you get a much, better sunsets. It's a very, very special place. And I always say that life should be measured not in great riches, but in how many great sunsets you've witnessed, right? And I think that Queen Mary 2 is the right ship to do that for you.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think, I was traveling with my friend Luke on the last trip we did on the crossing, and he's been on Queen Mary 2 cruises before, and he has said on a number of occasions when we've been up on the top decks of the ship on the cruises, why is this such an open, wasted space? But when we did the transatlantic crossing, he's like, oh, I get it. This ship was designed for this body of water. She spends more than half the year there. This is an area for you to go for a stroll where it's sheltered to get out from the main part of the ship, but it's not designed to be a ship that has a water playground on board, because she is literally battling it through the Atlantic seas and doing it in style and doing it without really moving all that much when you compare her to other, you know this better than anyone, Queen Mary 2 versus Queen Anne on the North Atlantic. Which one are you going to choose hands down, right?
Yeah. I'm pleased that you have used my QE2 footage time and time again on your videos recently. I know I said you didn't have to credit me, but I kind of feel like I need a bit of credit now, because
100%.
I filmed that Queen QE2 crossing from Queen Victoria when we did the tandem maiden crossing of Queen Victoria. And I wish I had a better camera. I was shooting that at like 640 by 480. I mean, it's such an old school experience. But just watching an ocean liner at work, in the ocean, and I guess that's why you keep using that footage, because you really get to see. I might have accidentally filmed like the best 7 seconds of QE2 ever, because you actually see what that design is all about, why she's like an arrow through the North Atlantic.
I'll stick it up now so that people can see what you're talking about. I have so many photographs of QE2, probably tens of thousands, but we don't have much video because she retired in 2008. The footage I have of voyages on board was filmed with, magnetic tape from the 90s. And in the 2000s, we just were really focusing on photographing the ship, not really thinking, back in 2002 and that, when we were traveling on QE2, there was no YouTube. So you just didn't think about it as take photographs of everywhere, we'll have a great memory of the ship. And then you send me this footage of, after knowing you for years and not knowing that you had this footage, of the Queen Elizabeth II at sea in the Atlantic. And she's just magnificent. Like, she's cutting through the water. You can see the way that she's lifting herself up and then riding on top of it to give you a smoother ride. Mm-hmm. What a different motion to the way that the cruise ships do it. And I think everyone loves it. And those videos where the QE2 footage that you filmed is at the front of the video, the retention of people just like mesmerized by this ship. So you did say don't credit you, but I should put your name up on the next time I use it, because
it's okay. I don't mind about that, but I think it's important that we reference the fact that watching these ships doing their thing, like there's one clip that is used on all the documentaries of Queen Mary 2. I think it was originally filmed by an Australian production company, where it tracks round the front of the ship, and it just looks incredible. Just like seeing these things, when you see them docked, they don't have any of that majesty.
Yeah.
It's a bit like an aeroplane when it's on the ground, when you're taxiing and it's going over the little lights in the middle of the runway, and you're bouncing and you're hearing everything shaking. But then the moment that the plane lifts off and the wheels leave the ground, and suddenly you're like, That's what this thing is supposed to do. It's literally supposed to be flying. It's not designed to be on the ground. And it's the same with the ocean liner. Like when it's docked, it's like a big hunk of steel. But the moment it sets off and it opens the taps a little bit, take it to sea, Mr. Murdoch. You're suddenly like, this is a mode of transport. This is a vessel.
Yep.
And the ship feels much more comfortable in motion than it does when it's docked.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I mean, I know she's long since retired, but when QE2 used to open up, I mean, my last voyage on QE2, we achieved over 30 knots in one section. And you go and stand on that aft deck, one deck just behind the swimming pool where those curved awnings came in, and the ship, I mean, it wouldn't have been great if you had a cabin in that part of the ship, but she would just go as she was like plowing through the water at such speeds. Queen Mary 2 does it so effortlessly. You don't really feel any of that, but you do when she goes. You can tell that Queen Mary 2 is not being run at speed. She feels like, even on the Atlantic doing a 7-day crossing, she's magnificent.
She wants to go faster.
But she wants to go faster. She's like, this is too slow for me. Let me do a 5-day crossing. But then, of course, she probably knows that the fuel price is pretty expensive.
Yeah, she's probably worked that out now. She's decided to be less thirsty than she should.
Well, those gas turbines that they use on board, they're needed for that extra speed, for the maximum speed that she can achieve, and they really are very, very expensive to run because that fuel is a very high grade of fuel, and it was nice and affordable back in 2002 and 2003, but it's not anymore. So rarely does she go at speed.
A wonderful experience. Dr. Stephen Payne actually arranged for me to go down into the bows of the ship and meet with the chief engineer.
Yes.
And so we talked all about this, and we really spent quite a bit of time kind of discussing this, this event, or not just the effort that the ship goes to kind of maintain its systems. And it was so exciting being down there, and it was just fantastic in there. And we ended up chatting for so long that I didn't realize that they'd actually asked the captain to welcome us on the bridge as well. I don't know if I told you this. And so the poor captain is waiting up there for us, and we never showed up because we didn't know. And the very nice lady who was taking us around, she was maybe too nervous to interrupt us because we were in such flow with the chief engineer. So eventually we get up to the bridge, and she's like, "Where's the captain?" And they were like, "Well, he waited for you, but you guys took so long that he's got off now. He's not on duty anymore." So I must apologise to the captain.
Well, you got to have a drink with him in the Commodore Club, didn't you? Or the
That's
pub.
Right.
Yeah. So.
In the pub, yes. He watched my wife do karaoke in the pub, and we celebrated our successes.
Well, Anthony,
briefly.
That's a very good place to dock the Queen Mary 2 today, because we've unfortunately run out of time. I think karaoke is pretty much the bookend of the Cunard story. If we start with the Britannia all those years ago, where passengers were sleeping in bunks and there was a cow on the top deck, and now you can do karaoke on an ocean liner that's hardly moving in an Atlantic storm. So what a nice way to end this week's show.
Join us next week. We do this every week, a chance for the nerds amongst us who love a cruise, who love a Cunard crossing, who relish cruise day, to kind of come together and do a deep dive debrief and a level of nuance and analysis that you might not find at home.
Yes, exactly.
Or indeed amongst your social group. So we'll be here for you.
We're a safe space for the ship nerds.
Yeah, exactly. Nerd alert. All right. Take care. Don't forget to check out the Substack, the Maritime Historian. Comment down below, share the show, and join us next week for another episode of the Expert Cruise Show. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.